Well, folks, looks like they have closed down Bethel, so I can no longer create videos from any room at Bethel, so you're stuck with my voice and whatever image I can get you on the screen here. I'm sorry about that. We'll do the best we can. I know I could put my face on here too, but I don't think you need that. So, yeah, we were talking last time about the lymphatic system and immunity, and left off with consideration of what pathogens were, and the idea then that really your body has two general types of immunity, both non-specific and specific. By those terms, I mean non-specific means it isn't looking, your body isn't looking to identify any particular kind of pathogen. Rather, it will just ward off any kind of pathogen with a non-specific defense, and I'll give you an example in a second. A specific type of immunity is a defense mechanism whereby your body first identifies a pathogen, and you remember that list of pathogens: bacteria, viruses, parasites, all those sorts of things. Your body identifies it, and then comes up with a defense to eliminate that pathogen. Well, let's start with non-specific immune defenses. These would be things like physical barriers. The image that I have on the screen is one from last time when we were looking at blood poisoning, but on this one I wanted to look at the larger picture, and it's the skin. And of course there's oils on that skin, and they're not there by accident. They're a defense mechanism to help protect the skin. The skin itself is a protection. The skin helps thermoregulate our bodies, keep pathogens out specifically. And burn victims, when their skin is burned so severely, that's oftentimes lethal because it's really opening the door to pathogens. There's other issues, of course, that a burn victim faces, but that's one of them. And then there's the one a lot of people are dealing with right now, and that is the snot in your nose and elsewhere in your body that lines the digestive tract. That mucus is another non-specific defense mechanism. Your nose produces it to capture what might come in through your airway that you don't want deep down in your lungs, and hold it in that mucus, and you will then it will either travel down your digestive tract and get broken apart, or you'll blow it out into your Kleenex. The acidic environment of your stomach could be considered a non-specific immune defense because there's not much that can survive that. Few things. Helicobacter pylori, we know the bacteria that causes ulcers can survive it, but not much can. And then actually bacteria themselves are a non-specific immune defense because their presence, the presence of certain bacteria, mean that there's not a place for non-desirable bacteria to live. You want to have the right flora and fauna on you and in you. We've already talked about beneficial bacteria in your digestive tract, which help make some of the B vitamins and vitamin K, which is essential with clotting. So you know that you have to have bacteria in your body, and if you kill them all off, for instance, if you're on an antibiotic for a long time, and that can kill off many or all of the bacteria in your gut, that means your gut is more susceptible then to being taken over by a bacteria you don't want. You can get a secondary problem from that antibiotic even. So bacteria themselves can be beneficial. Secondly, pertinent to the picture on the screen is the inflammatory reaction. And there's obviously a skin injury up here. I hope that cursor shows up. An initial injury, and if you look closely at that, there are many things that we can see that are going on here that are non-specific immune defenses. Well, when that initially happened, no doubt there was bleeding, and bleeding is good to flush any pathogens from the wound. There is also pain associated with that. I'm guessing a number of you, when you were children, I think myself included, put your hand on the burner. And hopefully none of you put your hand on the burner twice, because you learned from that, because you got a pain sensation. There are a number of diseases, Hansen's disease or leprosy, where a person can lose a feeling in an appendage of the body. Leprosy or Hansen's disease doesn't cause a part of the body to deteriorate and fall off. You're actually losing nervous sensation there. You can't tell that there's been an injury there. I had a good friend, well, actually it was an older lady when I was a little kid. I mowed her lawn. And she lived with her sister and her brother. And one of them was, or two of them were widowed and whatever. And anyway, she had Hansen's disease, but she liked to sew. And so she would be there with her sewing machine and working the fabric through. And several times, as I understand it, she actually sewed her hand right to the fabric because she couldn't feel the needle going through her skin and sewing it right to the fabric. And so then the problem with Hansen's disease or leprosy is that the wounds become infected and gangrene sets in, and then a person may in fact lose a part of their body. So pain, not necessarily a bad thing. So on this wound site, so there was an initial wound, there was bleeding, there was pain. It's not, you can't really see it, but it's not hard to imagine how that area could be slightly inflamed or swollen, and I think that's probably familiar to you. There's definitely redness around it, in it and around it. And if you've had an injury like that, you know that it can be warm to the touch. You can actually feel it being warm. All those are part of what's called the inflammatory response. That heat makes it less attractive to bacteria invading it. The redness means that the tissue is inflamed. There's lots of fluid going to the area to flush the wound out, and also to make it swell up, because after the initial bleeding flushes the wound, then you want it to swell up to stop bleeding to the area. So all those are part of that specific inflammatory reaction. The specific substance that causes the pain response is something called bradykinin. It does a number of things. It's also a vasodilator. That word vasodilator means it makes vessels larger. To dilate means to make them larger. And so it does that, but one of the things it does, it causes your nerves to fire, and it causes you to feel pain. In your notes then, if you're going through your notes, you'll notice the next thing is mast cells. And mast cells really a kind of a basophil. If I open up that document that we had from before, the basophils were sort of the bluish colored ones here, and they were a granular white blood cell. And so those granules, some of those granules actually contain chemicals, histamine and heparin. Histamine is something that causes you to swell up. That would be a way to think of it. So here's a basophil on a real blood slide. And heparin is an anticoagulant, like lining the capillary tubes that we talked about before, and would cause a wound area to continue to bleed and flush it out. So those mast cells, kinds of a basophil, would carry those substances to the wound area to do those things, to make the vessels get larger, carry more fluid there, and to keep the blood from clotting for a bit anyway, until the wound was flushed out. In addition to that, then, when we're talking about the inflammatory response, capillaries open up, fluid, proteins, white blood cells, all go into the wound area. Those proteins, some of them are gamma globulins, which are antibodies which fight pathogens. The fluid will flush it out. We know the white blood cells will do battle with any pathogens that might have gotten in. In response to that, the tissue reddens and swells. The temperature increases, as we've talked about. And generally, that is going to be the defenses that your body will use every time you wound or damage an area. Specific other white blood cells evolve will be neutrophils and monocytes. You see those there in the notes. They move into damaged tissue, and there's an image from your textbook that helps visualize that. Here we have damaged tissue. Okay, this is the bloodstream right here, the blood supply. Here we have those types of white blood cells, monocytes or neutrophils, squeezing out through maybe aquaporins or any kind of a gap in a cell, and it can do that. kind of like an octopus can squeeze through a tight constricted space, and out into the tissues, and there they're going to do battle. The green things are the pathogens, the bacteria, and the monocyte will convert to a macrophage and eat it up, and the neutrophil would do the same thing. And it's just like that image of the amoeba. Where is that now? Eating a paramecium, right here, that we looked at before.
Right in your morning.
Okay. Oh, it's gonna. Well, if you remember, it's circling, surrounding it, and right there, that's what a macrophage or a neutrophil will do. Okay, and basically destroy that pathogen. Okay. So that process of consuming a pathogen is called phagocytosis. It actually has a name. You can see that there in your notes. And so that process means to eat. To phagocytize means to eat. And then also, as this is all going on, there are chemical messengers that go to your bone marrow and actually cause a rapid increased production of neutrophils to further defeat that infection. There is another non-specific response that is complement proteins, and this is an image from your textbook. And these are a series of proteins, you can see them here hopefully, that will do a number of things. There's a number of ways they can defeat this pathogen. They can drill a hole in the membrane and of the pathogen and destroy the cell membrane. They can also basically put what's called a granzyme in there and sort of mess up that pathogen. It can promote inflammation, or it can enhance, basically cause those neutrophils to eat them up more rapidly. So that's called complement protein. And then lastly, there is this old substance called interferon. When I was a kid, this was going to be the next silver bullet for infections and cancer treatment. There was discovered a chemical produced by virally infected cells that caused other nearby cells to produce these proteins, these interferon proteins, which would interfere with viral replication. So the virally infected cells produce a protein, produce a message, a signaler, if you will, not interferon yet. So the virally infected cells produce the substance, a chemical messenger, goes to nearby cells, triggers them to produce interferon, and interferon interferes with viral replication or viral expansion, if you will. So those are all some non-specific immune defenses that your body has. And I'm going to stop there and start another video on specific immune defenses. Specific immune defenses are those that your body undertakes after it has identified a specific pathogen. The coronavirus, the influenza virus, the pneumococcal virus, or a bacteria, whatever. That's what a specific defense does.